Welcome to the Running for Real podcast, where each week we bring you a conversation designed to help you create positive change in your life, community, and planet. It's a collective of conversations about running, the climate emergency, and social justice. Running for Real is for the brave, for those with courage and vulnerability. United by our love of running, we're driving momentum towards some of the really tough challenges we're facing as humanity. So come join me, Tina Muir, and let's get started. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 271 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for being here today. This is an episode I never hoped to be doing through the internet, through a video call version of what we hope to do. I really didn't see this coming, that I wouldn't be doing this recording with the person in the room with me, as my guest today is Kyle Robidoux. And Kyle and I intended on running Boston together for this 2021 Boston. However, both ended up in a bit of an awkward situation in terms of I was having a peroneal flare-up. He has a stress fracture. And so we didn't end up running together, either of us. When he had the stress fracture, I decided that was just a good reason to step back completely. And I will go into this a little bit in the episode, but I wanted to, it's just something that I feel a bit sad about. I did end up having an amazing weekend, the weekend of Boston, and Kyle had a great experience being a supporter, a spectator, a volunteer, and it was different for both of us. We ended up doing that weekend in a way we didn't expect, but I look forward to another time of doing the marathon with him. Okay, so that said, Kyle Robidoux, he's an avid skier, he's a runner, he's a local beer enthusiast, you'll hear a little bit about that, and he's a non-profit manager. And he, according to his website, which I feel, I don't usually read from people's website, but I feel it sums him up so well. It says he's worked tirelessly to ensure that he is not defined by the boundaries that others place on him and his vision. And Kyle lives that. I really am so inspired by this guy today, his journey, what he has been through, what he has done with his life. It is just an amazing thing to hear about. And I don't want to give away a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, but this is a really real, raw episode. We had just decided not to run a few days prior to recording this, so you're getting to hear him processing not running Boston, which was a painful one for him in real time. And we had a bit of a conversation about injuries. So I hope you enjoy this episode. And let's go meet Kyle. Thank you to Good Earth for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Summer is coming to an end, but it doesn't mean that your sunglasses can't be there for every step of every moment of every day, especially now the sun is starting to come up later and go down earlier. That means more opportunities for the sun to be blinding us in the eyes, and that is where having a pair of Gooders near you at all times, which I do, is going to come in really handy. They have so many fun unique patterns and personality styles if you want to go check those out, or you can just stick with the simple ones that are just black with black, or maybe if you want to be a little bit adventurous, you could do a black frame with a blue lens. Whatever you like, there are all kinds of different types for every personality type, and I absolutely love them. They're fun, they're fashionable, they're functional, they're affordable. No slip, no bounce. They're all polarized and they're fun. Every purchase of Gooder sunglasses is backed by a 1-year warranty. They have 30-day free returns, and they are a 100% carbon neutral company, which is amazing. They also sunglasses that give back. They're proud members of 1% for the planet, as is Running for Real. And that means 1% of Gooder's annual gross sales go directly to environmental non-profits working towards making our world a better place. I love being a part of 1% for the planet, and you should consider it too if you can. You can get yourself 15% off your entire order by going to goodr.com/Tina. That's 15% off at goodr.com/Tina. If you want to support me and you can support the show, you can treat yourself to a pair or two or three and head over to goodr.com/Tina. Get 15% off your order. Some of my favorites are a ginger soul, the flamingos on a booze cruise I'm loving right now, and they have some new collections out there, including a marathon series, some cosmic crystals series, and there's just so many other fun ones. Oh, and if you are worried about blue light in the evenings, they actually have some blue blockers there. So that's another thing that I've been meaning to say. You can go check those out to get the blue light blocker glasses for the evening, if that is something that you find yourself unable to sleep if you are looking at blue light. So go to goodr.com/Tina to get yourself 15% off. Kyle, I was so looking forward to doing this in person. However, we are going to have to hold off that in-person hug and meet up for another time. But welcome to the Running for Real podcast. I'm excited to be talking with you, even if we can't be together in person right now.
Likewise, I appreciate the invite and certainly appreciate your support, and was also looking forward to seeing you in person and hanging out and touring Boston a little bit, and then doing a little shakeout run from Hopkinton to Boston.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't actually discussed this with you, but I'm going to do it on live on air. Can I request you for next year instead and have a date?
I think that is totally fine, although I need to figure out what next year means. But yes,
that's true.
The next time I run Boston, we'll definitely we'll make a go of it.
Sounds good. Perfect. Okay. So originally our plan was to record this in person. We were going to talk. We were going to hopefully do this post-race, and we were going to just be talking about our experience and what it was like, and encouraging people listening to sign up to be a guide in the future. And we can talk about that in a little bit. However, unfortunately, and kind of coincidentally, both you and I have ended up with foot problems. And so we are not going to be running Boston this year. And so we're doing it here virtually before the race. So I would love if we're going to work a bit through your history, your experience. You've got an amazing story. And I just reflect back to December 2019, when I heard you as the keynote speaker at the US Blind Association. Is that the official?
US Association of Blind Athletes.
That's it. Okay. I knew I was missing a word in there. And you were the keynote speaker, and I just remember being so inspired by your story. So I would love to share it with the community today. So we'll work through that. And then I think the second part we'll spend just working through what it feels like to have to pull out of a race that you've been working towards, that you've been looking forward to. I think a lot of people are going through this right now, and it's not really talked about that much, and it's hard to go through. So I figure we will spend some time on that towards the end. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay. To begin, I want to talk about the fact that you were not always a runner. This wasn't something that you did from childhood, and you were running around age 3, and people were saying, oh, he's going to be a runner someday. Tell us about how running did come into your life, and then we'll maybe work backwards a bit from there as to why it was so meaningful.
Sure. So I grew up running more so for fitness and to be in shape for other sports. So I played soccer, baseball, football, basketball, and started skiing. So I always ran, but it was less about competition or formal, but more about just staying in shape and getting ready for an upcoming season. So it was right around 2010 when I started running again. And I, at the time, was about 260 pounds, and I hit all the markers for an incredibly unhealthy body. I had high cholesterol, high blood pressure in my early 30s, and I knew I needed a lifestyle change. And I talk a lot about how my daughter, who is 14 now, was two at the time. And I was getting tired just playing with her. I was getting tired tying my shoelaces and bending over. So I knew I needed to do something different. So I started walking first. And then from there, I started to run in, like I said, about 2010. And I had an old pink Timex watch that just had the time on it. So I started running like 15 minutes and then 30 minutes. And I tried to just increase my time from there.
Was there, when you were going through this walking, getting onto running, did you have a goal in mind of like, I'd like to get to running more? Or was it literally like, I'm taking this day by day, I just know I need to change? It's that perfect example of when we say it's not about a diet or it's not about a specific one thing, it's the lifestyle change. So this is a good example of that. But even with that said, did you have a goal in mind, or you just, I mean, that's amazing if you were not able to get carried away of thinking like, where's the end point?
I definitely did not have a goal in mind. I think I was focused on trying to bump up, every week I would try to run a few minutes longer. And then I do remember like moving from like 3 days of running to 5. And then I definitely remember feeling kind of hooked and that sense of adrenaline being active again. And part of that was I had kind of subconsciously convinced myself that I could no longer run because of my eyesight. So I just started running and slowly progressing. And then I remember my in-laws live in Virginia and they have these great running paths all through Reston, Virginia. And I went out and my goal was, I think, to run an hour and 30 minutes. And then I hit an hour and 45 and felt great. And then I literally just ran back and forth on their street saying, hey, why don't I run to 2 hours? And when I hit 2 hours, my next thought process was, and my sister-in-law at the time was a very active runner and she still is. And when I hit 2 hours, I said, wow, when am I ever going to be able to run 2 hours again? I should sign up for a race. And that was when I signed up for my first half marathon.
I love that. Yeah, you hear that so often about running being that thing where people start slowly, they're not really sure if they belong, but then you have that moment where, wow, look where I've come, look where I'm going, and then getting hooked. And I love that from there, I mean, I actually didn't ask you the updated number. How many marathons have you done? 25 marathons and ultras?
I honestly, I don't know, Tina. I should keep track. I know I've done 5 100-milers.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you're probably off from that.
Yeah, and I know I've done 7 or 8 Boston marathons. So I don't know, maybe 25.
You got to be over 30. No, you got to be over 30 by the updates on your website.
Yeah,
you got
I
to
guess so.
Update that website, Kyle.
I know. We'll get someone on that right away.
Yeah, there you go. Get someone to sit there, spend an evening digging through, finding all your results and update that. Definitely. Okay, so then, you mentioned there about your eyesight. You have, if I'm going to say this correctly, retinitis pigmentosa.
Perfect. Yeah? That was perfect. Yes.
Great. Well, that's the first time I've ever said anything correctly. First time. And I would love to discuss there, when people think about someone who is visually impaired or think of someone like yourself who does these inspiring things, it's easy for us to assume that you are this motivated, driven, I've never let anything hold me back. I'm going to keep proving that I can do things, take on these new challenges. But that wasn't the case with you when you became legally blind at age 19. So tell us about the acceptance process that you went through before you could reach the point where you were able to be at the point you are now, where you take on challenges and find where your limits are.
Sure. A lot to unpack there. So thank you. I think to kind of set the context a little bit, so I was diagnosed with my eye disease. We call it RP for short, partly because it's easier to say, at 11, and told at the time that I'd be totally blind by college. So that was kind of the mind frame that I was working within. And my parents were incredibly supportive, but I often talk about how we didn't necessarily talk about kind of the social emotional impact of my vision loss. We certainly talked about how do I prepare for college and what activities do I do. It's also when I started skiing, but the actual impact of it, I didn't I didn't think a lot about. And I learned years later that that wasn't a very healthy way to deal with my vision loss. I just kept on pushing things off and said, hey, I still have usable vision at 20. This is great. Maybe I'll lose it at 30, but never really prepared for it from a professional, work standpoint, nor from a really kind of emotional mental health standpoint. And it wasn't until probably my late 20s where my now wife, and we were dating at the time, I think she pointed out that, I was really bitter and angry at my vision loss, because that's when it really started taking things away from me that I loved, like skiing independently and playing, recreational baseball and pickup leagues for baseball and softball. And I was just becoming really bitter and angry. So through her support and recommendations, I started seeing a therapist. And that was really hard for me, partly because of, and I'll identify it as a stigma to see a therapist, but at the same time, I'm also trying to break that stigma down, right? But I held those beliefs because, my dad, was a great man, but he was super proud. We never talked about things for the most part. So that's the kind of the mind frame that I grew up in, right? That you just hold everything inside and you don't really talk about it. So for me to start seeing a therapist was a huge step. And I remember the first conversation I had with him, he said, I have no experience working with folks who are visually impaired or losing their eyesight. However, I specialize in anger and anger management. So I think the things that you're experiencing are very similar to anyone who's experiencing a sense of loss or is angry about something. And I remembered he did this one cool activity with me. He had me ball up a piece of paper. And sometimes I do this in live activities, but he had me hold up a piece of paper and said, now hold that piece of paper in your hand and let it go. And I held in my hand and then I actually let it go to the floor. And it fell. So he picked it back up and he's like, now do the exercise again. And let me show you what you should be doing. And so I held it in my hand and I just opened up my hand to kind of let it go, but it sat in my hand. He's like, this is the mind frame that I want you to switch from, right? You can start thinking about your vision loss a little bit differently from what traditionally you've always thought about. So over 2 or 3 years of, weekly therapy, I started to kind of unwind that sense of loss and anger I had and became, built more tools to help me cope with my vision loss. And the biggest outcome of that was, I felt angry because all these things were being taken away from me. And what I realized at the end was I was giving up on all those things that I loved. And I just needed to adapt and change things up a little bit in order to continue doing them. So skiing with a ski guide or running with a sighted guide or some adaptations for technology, whatever it may be in the workplace. So that was a huge process for me. And I, especially talking to young people, I try to keep it real and be like, this isn't, rainbows and unicorns, right? Not everyone's just going to get a decision like this or an outcome and be like, you know what, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to move forward. It's often reflective of an ultra race, right? Or any race where you have these really lows and then you try to claw your way back and get to a high or a middle ground. And I feel like we don't talk enough about, the impact and how it's okay to feel really depressed and angry, but you got to work and develop those skills to help push through those moments.
Such good perspective there, but also like the way that you did tie it to a race, to running. And it's so funny how everything we can use a running analogy for. Like, I swear there's like nothing that if you're talking to another runner, you aren't like, oh, it's like in running where like it really does tie to everything. And I want to actually, maybe we will go on to talk about that feeling right now. But I'm curious with, you said about the therapist, like, do you think you would have come to that same approach when you said about those moments it was hard playing with your daughter without the therapy?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I see it every day when I worked with individuals who are blind and visually impaired. And, I don't want to call anyone out specifically, but I will call out, men have this some unrealistic sense of pride and ego. So it is really hard, particularly for men, but I think for everyone, to transition in a situation like this, whatever the diagnosis or the situation may be, whether it's relationship wise or professional work wise or something like, hearing loss or vision loss or cancer diagnosis, whatever it may be, right? It's hard to figure that out. And, we tell the story often about particularly folks with vision loss. So there's this thing, we go and get orientation and mobility training. So we learn how to use a white cane, and someone teaches us how to do that, and it's safe and it's helpful. But pretty much every male I know, we go through that training, we fold up our cane, and it literally sits in our drawer for like 5 years. And we're like, great, check that training box off. But then we never use it. And I was the same exact way. And I feel like the therapy and trying to understand this deep sense of anger, which I still have, right? But I just know how to manage it better. I think without that therapy and knowing how to name it and identify it and be comfortable with it, and then quickly, or maybe not so quickly, pivot and transition to moving through that, I would not have had those skills without going to see a therapist.
Thank you to Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. Today, we are brought to you by Athletic Greens, which is a health and wellness company that makes comprehensive daily nutrition really simple. Now, with so many stresses in life, it's hard to maintain an effective nutritional habit and give our bodies the nutrients they need to survive. We have busy schedules, there can be poor sleep, exercise, the environment, work stress, simply not eating enough of the right foods, definitely guilty. It can leave us deficient in key nutritional areas. AG1 by Athletic Greens is the category-leading superfood product. It's going to bring comprehensive and convenient daily nutrition to everyone. Keeping up with the research, knowing what to do, and taking a bunch of pills and capsules is hard on the stomach, and it's hard on our brains trying to keep focused. To help each of us be at our best, they simplify the path to better nutrition by giving you the one thing with all the best things. One tasty scoop of Athletic Greens, or AG1, contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food source ingredients, including a multivitamin, multi-mineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and best of all, I should say, in one convenient daily serving. The special blend of high-quality, bioavailable ingredients in a scoop of AG1 works together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, support energy and focus, aid with gut health, digestion, support a healthy immune system, which will effectively replace multiple products or pills with one healthy, delicious drink. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you an immune-supporting free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase if you go to athleticgreens.com/Tina. Again, simply visit athleticgreens.com/Tina to take control of your health, give AG1 a try. And with the vitamin D, many of the population are vitamin D deficient. Adding vitamin D to your daily routine, especially going into the winter months, is a great way to support vitamin D production as it gets colder and when there's less sun exposure. A lot of the health experts are noting the importance of vitamin D, and more studies are surfacing around its direct impact on supporting the immune system. So that is an additional reason to go get your hands on the Athletic Greens. You'll get a 1-year free supply. So go to athleticgreens.com/Tina. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big advocate for therapy, and I find that for me, anger is my I don't want to say outlet, but like that's where I go when I'm feeling like out of control and frustrated and things are building up is the same as you. And as a woman, I feel uncomfortable saying that, but I do agree with you that I think it is harder for men. And so for a man listening who, maybe their partner has suggested, like, I think it would help you to have therapy, that or they know it deep down that like it would be good for them to go do, but they just feel like I'm not ready yet. Do you have any advice for what you would say to the man listening who's thinking that right now?
I think, well, one thing I just want to say is that I don't think it's harder for one person or the other. I just think it's hard in general, and we all manage and cope in different ways. So I definitely don't want folks to think like, oh, men have it harder in the sense of transitioning or adjusting. But I think it's, at the end of the day, it helps. It helped me. I've never spoken with anyone who has given therapy or even sitting down with a counselor an honest shot.
Yes.
Never spoken with someone who said, wow, that did not help, right? Everyone comes out of it in the cathartic process and says it helps. And I think part of it is I have great support systems, great friends, great, family, wife, daughter, who are incredibly supportive. But it's powerful just to talk to someone who is not directly involved with your situation and giving you perspective, but also giving you that space to talk and get those things off your chest in a very non-judgmental and safe environment. And there's a lot of value in that. And I think folks, we need to sometimes get out of our own way and in clear space to kind of take that step. And I would say to folks, feel it out, and you don't have to commit 100%. But like I said, if folks go once or twice, I feel like you start to see the benefits really quickly. Even if it's just once a week for an hour, I think there's tremendous value in that. And I certainly feel like if I would have started it earlier, it would have been much more beneficial to my overall well-being and quite possibly my physiological and physical health in addition to my mental health.
Sure. Yeah. I can only speak for myself here, but I also find when you have supportive people around you, people who love you and are willing to listen, because they know you and because you are so used to being around them, at least in my experience, quite often it ends up being just a complaining session. Like you're just like, and then they did this and then they did that. And this was really annoying because this happened. But when you speak to a therapist, you present it in more of a rational way. But it also, when you're speaking, it allows you to give even more, like some empathy to the other parties involved or whatever's going on within you, because you're speaking it in a way that the therapist is going to be able to pick up what you're saying, even if you're not saying it. But at the same time, it just helps you to process it, even just, as you said, the cathartic bit of saying it. So that just came to me while you were talking. But I do think it's important, as you said, to mention, like, just because you have supportive people that you can talk to, an experience with a mental health professional is totally different in a really, really beneficial way. So anything else you want to add before we move on?
No, I think that sums it up.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's go into that a little bit more. So as of us recording this, we are a few days up from Boston. And you and I have had to pull out. Now, I'm sure you have had to pull out of races in the past. And I have to say, like, it completely took me aback when you said you were having problems and you thought you might have a stress fracture. Because I was so wrapped up in being healthy for you. Like, I was like, I got to get to the start line healthy. Like, I cannot do that. I cannot let him down. Like, I've got to make sure that I do everything I can to be like safe and healthy and ready for him. And there was no world where I even considered the fact that you are a human being who is a runner, who also, as we all do, sometimes gets carried away or might have things come up. And so, it was just interesting for me that, like, I would be curious to you if you've heard this before from guides that, like, you so connected and tied in to wanting to, be the best guide I can be, that I wasn't even considering the fact that you also were trying to get ready for a marathon, which is risky in itself. So has anyone ever said that to you before? Or have you had injuries?
Definitely, yeah. And I think it speaks to the partnership that sighted guides and runners create and that sense of responsibility. And it's also interesting, when I was struggling just to get my fitness back to where I needed to be this summer, my mentality was like, ooh, I need to get fit because Tina's guiding me, and I don't want to let Tina down and run like a 4.5, 5 hour marathon. So that was on my side. And I do also think the dynamic is a little bit different in that, in guides that are not geographically close to, who you're running with, in the sense that if I'm running with a guide every week, they'll have a better understanding of kind of where I'm at And also I get a better understanding where they're at. And I think it creates, and I'm also reflecting on things that I didn't do well with you. And, I should have communicated to you more around like, let's just make sure we check in on a regular basis and how are we feeling. And I also think in my mind, I was like, ooh, Tina has like a 2-hour cushion on what she runs and what she's going to guide me on. So there's no way that she's going to get injured because it's like a walk for her. But I do think those kind of communication points are really important around guides and runners. And it happens all the time. And I tend to also, most races, not all, but I tend to have backup guides. I didn't for this one, which worked out fine, also in hindsight. But I would also say that I actually think this is my first race that I've did not start because of an injury. I didn't start a race in the summer, which was definitely my first race ever, just because of my fitness, and it was a 50K, and I love to suffer, but the way that the terrain and the technicality of it, I was nervous around my own safety. But yeah, I think this is the first race that I've not started based on an injury.
And so let's talk about that. Like, there's a lot of people listening who have probably also had to DNS a race this fall, and especially with the year that we went through with 2020, where there were no races. I would imagine like there's a lot more pressure or a lot more excitement maybe for races. And so it's especially hitting hard because of that gap in racing. So how has that been for you to process? If you said that's the first time you're not starting, like how has that felt for you?
I've had my ups and downs, and I mean, I'm still processing it. You are actually probably the first person that I've spoken to outside of my family about it. So it's a little raw, and I think I have all those emotions around, wow, this is a race that it's the only race I have like a streak. I think I've run it the past 7 or 8 years. And so I've gone everything from like, oh, maybe I should just run it and push through, and to keep that streak going, because I really enjoy running Boston. And then, there's am I really injured? How serious it is? So I've talked about long-term impacts. And then, to be honest with you, because I don't not talk about this purposely, but I have struggled with weight and managing my weight, and I know that weight isn't always a healthy indicator of your overall fitness or health, but for me, it's helpful. So I have a really hard time managing my weight and my mental health when I'm not running. So that's actually helped me through this process, because in talking with my doctor, he said, hey, stop running for 3 weeks. We'll check in. And then I asked, I'm like, well, because I am an idiot and have an ego sometimes, what happens if I do run Boston? Like, am I going to have long-term injury? And he said, no, but your recovery will likely be much, much longer. He's like, you'll probably go from 3 to 8 weeks to, 8 to 20 weeks or 3 or 4 months in recovering if you put that much damage on your foot. And that was probably the most helpful information for me to hear, because it makes me nervous not being able to be active and running for 2 to 3 months, partly because I love doing it and it's my community, but also, like I said, it's really connected and tied to, my physical health as well. And I understand and know that I need to learn how to manage my alcohol and food intake without running. But that's a slow process. So, so all those things are kind of wrapped into, do I run or not? And yeah, so it's been, I have ups and downs. I went to the gym this morning and worked out, and I left there with absolutely no pain in my foot. And, I made sure I did activities or exercises that did not put any pressure on my foot, but it's a 2-minute walk from my house. And when I was walking home, I'm like, wow, I feel absolutely no pain in my foot right now. Maybe I should give this a go.
Yeah, I know it is. It's all too familiar with us of, it's that like, don't want to take a single day more off than you need to, but also knowing that like if you go over the line, it puts you back. And as you said there, this is a great example. Having a stress fracture is a good example of something that, like you said, you can get through it. It'd be very painful, but it would set you back so much. But with as runners, we're always trying to play that dancing game when we get something of I don't want to take a day off when I have to, or I don't want to in your case, take 3 weeks off when it doesn't hurt me to walk right now. But then having to kind of just be playing that game of ping pong in your head of, okay, I know it feels better, but my doctor has seen the evidence here. I need to listen to him. I need to pay attention to what he's saying, even if that little part of me that wants to run is ready to give it a go. And I know that so well, what you were saying about walking around and feeling fine and getting that urge to be well, it's just a 2-minute run, so why not test it out? And then it's just a slippery slope from there. You mentioned about, the run, doing a streak at Boston here. And I think that we could speak to that. I've never actually covered that on this podcast about there are a lot of people who have run streaks or who have race streaks. And, it is pretty cool when you hear someone who's been this person has done 27 this race in a row. And people are wow, that's amazing. And so, as you said, there is that ego part of that involved in that, well, here I go, I'm starting from zero. So how are you working through that part? And I don't want you to if this is painful or uncomfortable mentally, I don't want to, make things worse. But I do think this is something, especially in 2021, that people are leaning on quite a lot, are either run streaks or race streaks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to just be mindful of the opportunity and kind of the privilege to run Boston even once and just be grateful for that. So although it seems cliche-ish a little bit, I am just trying to focus on, if and when I get to run Boston again, that actual moment will be so wonderful and hopefully will trump, the streak or the lack of the streak. And it's, and I've also been focusing on, running Boston 8 or 9 times as a qualified runner within the adaptive visually impaired division. That's a great accomplishment in and of itself, regardless if it happens in consecutive years. So just really trying to focus on small ball a little bit rather than, kind of the home run swing of it.
Thank you to Beam for sponsoring this episode of the Running for a Podcast and supporting many of the Together runs, which I am loving hearing that you are enjoying. I want to talk today about the Elevate Variety Pack, which I have mentioned in the past, and I am testing out some of their other products. But in the meantime, this is what I am loving. So much so that my husband, Steve, and I walk in the door after our run. We walk straight past each other, and sometimes the kids go straight to the kitchen, grab a shaker, get some cold water in there and put one of these Beam Elevate packs into water and down it quickly because it tastes delicious. It is great for post-run, has those electrolytes and some other benefits. There is no added sugar. These hydration powders do not contain hemp. I just want to mention that. So there's no concern if you are avoiding CBD. And the variety pack brings you a mix of Elevate Balance, which is hydration and probiotic, Performance, which is hydration and energy blend, and Recovery, which is hydration and collagen. So whatever you want to be using or getting out of it, you can go do it like that. So with that variety pack, you have this chance to experience all the benefits of their 3 unique electrolyte powders. Balance has that potent blend of prebiotics, probiotics to support healthy digestion and immune function. The green energy coffee bean extract delivers an energizing boost, while compounds like beetroot and vitamin B help your body convert dietary energy into physical energy. And last but not least, the recovery restores collagen, while branch chain amino acids support tired muscles and help your body fight fatigue. They are really thoughtful with their ingredients. They are not just a hydration solution, but they're elevated supplements to help support hydration for each moment of your day. That's why their ingredients are sourced responsibly, and you'll never find added sugars, GMOs, or artificial sweeteners. So you can go to beamtlc.com and use code TINA. That's BEAMTLC.com and use code TINA to get yourself 15% off your order or 20% off if you want to sign up for a subscription. So go to beamtlc.com and use code TINA at checkout. Do you think that the streak thing is something that I feel like runners are always trying to find ways to take things that we do to an extreme, and not so much in this example with the racing something every year. And especially as you are in Massachusetts, like Boston is, your race basically. But I do see a lot of like with runners, we're constantly chasing these like compulsions that we have. And then we might get one like squared away, like, okay, I don't need to be obsessed with my pace, but then you now need to run a certain number of miles. And then maybe you get the mileage thing taken care of. And then you're like, oh, but I've run every day for 30 days, even though it's less. And so I'm going to do that now. Have you noticed that with yourself or with others, that as runners, we're kind of always chasing the ways that we can like use our mental health to, I don't know, work through some of our insecurities and things that we're struggling with in the rest of our lives?
Definitely. I mean, I think those personality traits are also what makes us great runners and competitive in nature. And I think it's a balancing act. Part of me wants to say, like, when you need those, let's call them mind tricks, right? Of a streak or whatever, it's running every day streak or a race or, a certain pace. Part of me also says, like, maybe that's time to take a break and just, dial back and be more in tune with the joy of running. But I also know that at times when we hit lows, those little tricks help us move through those lows and get us back to a space where we're really enjoying it. So I think it's a dynamic kind of schism in which we try to balance those compulsions with the joy of running and embracing everything that we love in doing it. And it's never going to be a perfect kind of circle, but I think the more that we can find balance that's the key in moderation.
Mm-hmm. And for you, this is still quite raw and fresh. And so maybe you don't have an answer here, but how do you plan on handling race day? Like, what are you going to do for self-care and for looking after yourself if, you're going to have to be there? And as you said, this is the first one you haven't done. Like, what do you intend on doing that day to be supportive? Or maybe it's too much for you to distract yourself if need be.
So jokingly, I will probably have my bib with me on race day morning, just in case I want to jump in. But no, I'm actually, seriously, so I've said for the past couple of years that, so I spectated Boston once, probably 10 or 12 years ago. One of my wife's and now our best friends was running it. So we went to the finish line, we cheered, it was a zoo. I checked that box and said, I'm never coming back to Boston again. So I've never cheered Boston since I've been, quote unquote, a runner. And I've often talked about like, oh man, I really want to see the elite runners and the back of the packers and the mid packers. So I'm gearing myself up to get really excited to cheer. So I'm right now, that's what I'm using to help me get through this, is that I'm very, very excited just being a spectator. And, not sure if the kids will listen to this, but, drinking a few beers and cheering all day long. I've been joking with friends who I know who are running it that, we're going to have squirt guns filled with fireball and shoot fireball at people as they walk by. So I'm hoping to truly embrace the spectator side of what is so special about the Boston Marathon.
Okay, a few questions. One, the fireball, are you squirting this at people you know or random people who are going by?
I would only squirt it at people who willingly want to take fireball.
Okay.
So this is a funny, quick a side tangent, but this past weekend, we, on the last minute, went up to Vermont to cheer on the Vermont 50 bike and running ultra race. So there are these big hay bales, and Vermont 50 has a tradition at like mile 30, there's a community cooler that's filled with beers, and the good beers are on top and the really bad PBRs on the bottom. So we were at mile 48 and there was these big hay bales in this huge, they call it mile long field. So we were putting like 2 beers at a time on these hay bales at mile 48. And as runners went by, we're like, have a beer, treat yourself. If you need some hydration, do it. And then everyone there kind of caught on, and people were cheering when folks grabbed one, and then cheered even louder when like there was one person who grabbed it and actually opened it in the moment. So
that's awesome.
I'll keep that kind of spirit in mind for the Fireball and or beers during Boston.
Wait a minute. So you said people were getting really excited when people opened it. What were the other people doing? Carrying it to the end?
Yeah. One guy. So the mountain bikers, I was joking and saying, and it was going up this hill on like a grassy field. And I say, if you pop a wheelie, you get a beer. If you don't pop a wheelie, you win a beer. And so this one guy actually grabbed the beer, got off his bike, took off his pack, and like put the beer in his pack. And I was like,
funny.
Yeah. I'm like, dude, like, that's fine if you don't want to drink it now, but like I would have put it in your pack for you. Like, no, I kind of needed the break a little bit. So I was like, fair enough.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I have yet to be brave enough to ever do something like that, to have like any beer or anything in a race. Although when I did my trail marathon, I did do the textbook Coca-Cola at mile like 23 or something, and I was really proud of myself because I've never, like, I was such a like straight and narrow sticking on the race fuel, and so for me having Coke was like a big step. So
it's the only ultra races are the only time of the year when I drink soda. Yeah,
it's and I have to say I quite enjoyed it, so I think I will make that part of my tradition. Okay, so then back to this. Do you have a spot in mind that you'll go to?
Most likely, my wife and daughter and some friends often cheer. We have a friend who lives almost at mile 24. So it's nice to have a fridge to put beers in and a restroom to use. So hoping to get to mile 24, and it's a decent spot where, there's big crowds, but it's not huge. You can kind of carve it out your own little, because it's on the opposite side of the street because it's residential where most people go. So that's probably where we'll aim, but we'll see. I've never actually tried. Like I said, I've never spectated, but you are able to kind of see folks early on in the race and then get back into the city to the finish line. But I'll probably just stay in one spot. Partly, like I said, I mean, I'm out of huge respect to the front of the packs. I've actually never seen like the runners run by, so I'm quite excited. And I feel like definitely not the finish area. I just don't want the crowds and the people around me, even during COVID, but even more so, I don't like those big crowds. So I think mile 24 will be a good spot.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be it's going to be one of those situations where you'll definitely have the painful pangs, and they're like, oh man, like this is so hard, and, maybe emotional, but then you'll learn things about yourself. You'll get to see some really cool experiences that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I think it would just be great to be a part of it and feel that energy in a different way.
Definitely.
I bet that's going to be so exciting. Okay, so going back to your story a little bit, we said 25 plus marathons and ultras, 5 100-milers, and you did Trans Rockies in 2018, which, for some reason seems to keep coming up in conversations with people. I don't know if I feel like the world is trying to tell me that this is an amazing event to do. But tell us about, earlier on you were saying that it was difficult, that you felt like things were being taken away from you in terms of with your visual impairment, that, everything was being taken, but now you have adapted and you have found ways to go do these challenges and do things that are going to test you. So talk about like the process of that. Once you started to change your perspective, how did it move from, okay, I've completed a marathon. Okay, what else can I do? Okay, I've done an ultra. Okay, how much further can I go? Talk about like the evolution of your, testing yourself.
Yeah, and it's always a process in terms of where I'm at with my mind, and particularly with my vision. As someone who continues to lose my vision, I do have, for folks listening, I have what we call usable vision. So I wear glasses. I'm corrected 20/40, but my visual field is down to about a 3%. So it's kind of looking through a really narrow paper towel roll. So every day I think about, oh, will I still enjoy running trails and doing ultras if and when I lose all of my vision? So it's a continuing process of trying to think through that and embrace what I love to do. And then looking back, marathons, I transitioned from marathons to ultras partly because the training for marathons was becoming monotonous and boring to me. Also, you can always try to run harder and train harder, increase your speed and your pace. But just doing like the back, like 20-mile runs on Saturdays and 6 to 8 mile runs on Sundays, like that to me was boring. So I needed to be more engaged in the training. So when I signed up for my first ultra race, which was a timed race, I started running, stacking back-to-back days. So almost every weekend was a new kind of benchmark for me, in which I ran 3 hours on Saturday and 2 hours on Sunday. I'm like, wow, I've never done that. And then the next week, 3 hours and 3 hours. So that became really exciting for me and re-engaged me in the training process. And then there was just a natural transition, obviously running that timed race, but then, which was kind of on a hard surface, then transitioning to trails. I love the outdoors. I grew up in Maine. So getting more into trail ultra running was a natural transition. And I think at the time I knew I wanted to run 100-miler, but I spent probably 2 or 3 years of doing ultras leading up to that. I tried to be really thoughtful and slow around the progression. And, I ran a couple 50Ks and some 100Ks and 50-milers leading up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I think, well, there's obviously two ways people go about this. They either jump right in at the deep end and just see what happens. But I think most people probably follow the path that you're on, which is to gradually build up and work your way up to those more difficult distances. And you mentioned there about you don't know if you will continue to enjoy trail running as much as your vision, continues to worsen. So there's got to be some things that have heightened or, become you appreciated more or enjoyed more as that has happened. I'd love for you to share some of that with us, some of the things that you really have grown to maybe appreciate or to pay attention to.
So I really try to focus on things that make me happy and things that I have control over. So I've learned that I don't have control over my vision loss. And although at times it depresses and makes me angry, I can't control it. But what I can control is the way in which I respond to it and I adapt to it. And then I focus on the things that I love. So when I think about trail running, the first thing that pops up, to be honest with you, is just the sense of community. And, you get this in road in any running community, but the trail and ultra running community, I do feel is pretty unique and special. So I will always have that community with or without full sight. So I'll still be able to go on long training runs with folks and have a couple, we call them PLBs, parking lot beers, after long training runs. And I'll still be able to go cheer at races and help out and volunteer, and I'll be able to participate. And will I be able to see these grand, vistas like Trans Rockies or running in Vermont? Maybe, maybe not. But there's a lot of other opportunities and benefits, particularly sharing miles, sharing stories. And my guides often say, they're like, wow, your ability to slow down or speed up when you start running next to someone, like they notice it all the time. And I'm like, yeah, like, cause I want to share, like, part of running, if you're going to spend 23 to 28 hours running, like, God damn it. Like, I want to talk to people. Right. And I want to meet new folks. I want to, reconnect with other, old friends. So I'll always slow down or maybe speed up a little bit, just the chit chat with folks. And I'm always they sometimes comment, like, I love running by folks. And if they're struggling, I'm not the first one, but I'm always happy to slow down and say, hey man, like, run this next mile with me, just see if you can get things moving. And to me, those are the things I find really special in the trail and ultra running community. And I'll always be able to have those experiences with or without vision.
Also the things that are special about you, in terms of you being able to drop the part of your ego that wants to keep going to do your best, but instead supporting people and And yeah, like you say about community, I mean, from what I see, you are a huge part of building community. So I love hearing that it's special to you, but I hope you also recognize how important you are within the community as well, because it's evident from the outside. And that said, it's funny, as much as I'm sad to be not going to Boston, the part that of the whole thing that like I just was selfishly like, I can't wait to spend 5 to 6 hours with all the before stuff, at least just chatting to Kyle and really getting to know him on a deeper level. And I obviously can now save that wish for another race. But it's funny, that was the thing above everything else that I was so excited for, was not even to be running the race. As much as I shouldn't say that with Boston. I know how much of a privilege it is to be on that course. But it was just having that time with you to really get into, like, to see where our conversation went and to just have that experience. So I love that you mentioned that, because that's the part that I'm kind of mourning the loss of the most, even though I know, our friendship will continue and we'll have more of that. But
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I agree. And I really appreciate and grateful for the kind words in your friendship. And I'm right there with you, like just spending the time with guides and friends. And I still haven't sat down and truly thought about how I'm part of the reason, like I don't do a lot of road marathons anymore and big city marathons at that. But I, like Boston is my hometown marathon, and I understand the honor it is to qualify and run it every year. But it's not my first choice. But one of the reasons why I continue to come back is that community, getting to spend all weekend long with 30 to 40 runners who are blind or visually impaired, who I see all throughout the country in different races, where we've created this sense of community with social media, and then the guides and the charity bib runners and all these folks. Like, that to me is what's so darn special about Boston Marathon weekend. And quite honestly, I haven't figured out like how comfortable I'm going to be. There's dinners, there's parties, there's events, and I'm still trying to figure out like my level of participation in those, because I've never, traveled to a race or participated in a race that I'm not actually running in. So I'm hopeful that I'll still plug in to the same level that I was planning to, but it's hard just doing that, knowing that I'm not running, and, I'll have to walk away from everyone else when they, quote unquote, start the race. And there I am on the sideline cheering.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your honesty, sharing with us. I appreciate the vulnerability that you have shown so far in this conversation. Now, I'd love to talk on that note of someone listening, or someone who had been paying attention to the fact that I was talking about being excited, and that we'll be doing this hopefully many, many more times in the future. What would you say for someone who, where can they go if they haven't listened to my episode with Rich Hunter, which I will put a link in the show notes? Where can people go, and what should they do to go, potentially be a guide where they live?
Sure. So one, I would just say that anyone and everyone can be a guide. So there are guides needed for all abilities and levels, if that's walkers, if that's running a 5K or running a 10K or marathon and up, and then all paces, right? Everything from a 5-hour marathon to, my buddy, former coworker, runs a 2:32 marathon. So all abilities, all levels are needed as guides, and there's training and there's support to get folks up and running. And I strongly do feel that with a little bit of training and support and strong communication, everyone can be a sighted guide, while also recognizing that folks are nervous because they don't want to hurt the person who they're running with, et cetera, et cetera. So anyone can do it. And if you're interested locally, there are a couple ways to plug in. One is unitedinstride.com. It's just United, UNITED, in stride.com. It's a website that can help match folks. So you can look up runners who are blind or visually impaired in your community and reach out and connect with them. And then there are organizations like Achilles International that has chapters all throughout the country, just rattling them off, like St. Louis and Boston and New York, and Colorado has a couple big chapters, San Francisco. So there's some Achilles International chapters. So you can just Google Achilles International And they're on their website, they have a list of all their chapters and contact information. And I tell folks also that, part of being a sighted guide, it's great because you're volunteering while doing something you'd already be doing if you're an active runner, right? So I have some blazing fast guides who, like, I run with them on their recovery days, right? Which I'm totally fine with. But they're excited because, we're running together and they'd be running anyways. And I have some guides who I run with every week and some who I run with once a month. So it also allows a lot of ability and flexibility to kind of plug in and plug out where you're able to.
For sure. Thank you for mentioning that. And I'll put lots of links in the show notes for that. And I'm glad you mentioned at the beginning there about everyone doing it, because I mean, Kyle, if you could hear me, like, everywhere I go, I swear, I'm like, go to United in Stride. Like, you could sign yourself up. But people are always like, oh, I don't know if I could do that. Like, I wouldn't want to mess things up. And so I'm glad you spoke to that at first, because I think people, and I remember being very nervous the first time I did that it can feel quite intimidating, but I think people will see very quickly that it doesn't have to be. If you are prepared to, like, as you said, do a little bit of, preparation and thinking about it ahead of time. And so I will put links in the show notes to go do that. And, I just want to reiterate that, I mean, the times when I've been a guide have been some of the most rewarding and, important, running moments in my running life. Like, they've been so meaningful. And by running with someone in your area, even if you can't travel to races, if you can sign up once, like you said, once a week, once a month, that makes a huge difference and is just really meaningful. Anything else you would like to say to the community, to the listeners? Or maybe we should finish with you telling us what your favorite beer is, as you've made it pretty clear that you are, and it is on your everything, that you are a beer enthusiast, if there is such a term. So what beer would you recommend everyone goes out and tries today?
That's so there are two ways that I answer this. One, I drink a lot of Athletic Brewing Company beer, which is non-alcoholic beer. I actually use that to supplement my training a lot during the week, and they have a bunch of flavors and styles, and they're able to ship everywhere. So I use that to balance. And then my go-to favorite beer style is actually, well, I'll do two as a nod to you. So one, Saison and Farmhouse Ales are my absolute favorite style. And then growing up in Maine and New England, we have a tradition of kind of British and UK beers. So I actually grew up drinking a lot of bitters and brown ales, into a lot of malt. So I also I'm a fan of a brown ale, nice, smooth, kind of well-balanced brown ale as well. And I try to drink as much local beer as possible. So if it's within a couple of miles or within my state or area, that's what I try to focus on.
Well, thank you for sharing that I don't want to say wisdom with us. That's not the right term, but I am glad to see that some English stuff featured in your favorites, as you are someone who knows it well. So that's really cool to hear. I can't say I'm a fan of those myself. I'm a cider girl. But yeah, I've just never really got into beer. And I have heard a lot of people talking about athletic rowing. Haven't tried it myself, but everyone who tries it seems to love it. So that's interesting to hear that even someone who, tries a lot of different things still likes that. So that's a good sign for them, definitely. Okay, Kyle, anything else you want to tell the listeners before we wrap up, be it about, working through tough moments, about struggling with injuries, about mental health, anything else that's come to mind while we've been talking that you'd like to say?
I think whenever we're struggling with decisions like this or trying to move forward, it's always helpful just to reset both your body and mind and change things up a little bit and realize that things, particularly like running, it's always going to be there. And we just have to be patient and let it come back to us and then figure out other ways to plug in, whether it's through volunteering or crewing or supporting other runners. There's a lot of opportunities to plug into the running community. So I think folks will figure out how to do that and reach out to me and others within your network if you need a little bit additional support. So thank you, Tina, for inviting me on and for your kind of support and participation and being such a wonderful ally to our community. And I definitely look forward to sharing more miles with you, maybe even some trail miles and a cider as well.
Let's do it. That sounds amazing to me. Kyle, where can people go find you and follow along in the future?
So for public speaking, my website is kylerobidoux.com. And on Instagram, I'm at Blind Beer Runner. And on Twitter, I'm Kyle R. Robidoux.
Okay, perfect. And I will just say for anyone who needs a public speaker, incredible public speaker, like one of my favorites. So if you're looking for someone for your next event, cannot recommend this guy enough. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you, and can't wait to lock you into a race where I can selfishly have you to myself for hours on end. So let's make it happen.
That's great. Thank you, Tina.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. I am so thankful for that friend of mine. Thank you to Kyle for being so vulnerable with us and letting us sit with you, and also you sit with me and everyone listening sit with me about processing not doing a race, because it's not an easy thing to do. We've all experienced it or had gone ahead and had a bad experience. So I think it's good for us to have episodes like that. I admire Kyle so much, and I really look forward to running with him again sometime in the future. Maybe that'll be Boston. Maybe we've joked about it being an ultra. Who knows? We will find out. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for today. Gouda, you can get 15% off your order by going to gouda.com/Tina. That's GOODR.com/Tina. And that will get you 15% off your order. You can get a 1-year free supply of vitamin D with your Athletic Greens order. This is for UK, Canada, and Europe friends, in addition to US friends who already know about this. A 1-year free supply plus some free travel packs of Athletic Greens, AG1. And you can go to athleticgreens.com/Tina for that. And finally, thank you to Beam. You can go to BEAMTLC.com and use code Tina to get yourself 15% off your order. Thank you so much to Kyle today. Thank you so much to you. If you haven't already checked out Together Runs, go do that. They are really becoming very popular, and it's really fun to hear your experiences with that. Thank you so much, friends, and I will see you next Friday.